And so right now, our next category, we'd like to invite someone really interesting. In fact, she was on Shark Tank. If you guys are a fan of Shark Tank, I know I am religious. But what she shared with us is that for young kids who are interested in being engineers, that's great if they're able to, take part in STEM. But that doesn't mean that they have to be an engineer. It means you can also consider being a teacher, an artist, an historian. Lavanya Jawaharlal, I'm really sorry. Lavanya is a senior studying mechanical engineering with a concentration in engineering leadership at the University of California, right here at Berkeley. She currently serves as the executive vice president of UC Berkeley, representing 36,000 students. She's also the co-founder and president of STEM Center USA, which is an educational robotics company that excites students into learning STEM fields through hands-on education. Now, like I said earlier, interesting fact about her, she was recently aired on ABC's Shark Tank, where she pitched STEM Center USA and confirms a $200,000 deal with my very favorite, Lori Greener. I don't know how to pronounce her last name, sorry. But today she'll be speaking about how she built her own company and helps students overcome stereotypes when pursuing their passions. So please, welcome to the stage, Lavanya.
Hello everyone, and good afternoon, or good morning, I believe. We still have 30 minutes. First of all, thank you so much for having me here today. My name is Lavanya, and I'm very, very excited to be here. Now, the topic of this session is innovation. And so, as was mentioned earlier, I actually just co-founded my own company called STEM Center USA. And so, let's see if this works. There we go. Co-founded my company, STEM Center USA. STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and math. I work with students in K through 12 as well as college level students. And what I've seen working with them over the past 3 years is an interesting level of what education means to students, especially at different levels. And so for the next 18 minutes, I want to talk about how our education system is, was, and how it should be. Let's see. I can't get this. There we go. So, innovating education means I want to flip the format. What that means is our education system was actually developed and adapted for the age of enlightenment and the Industrial Revolution. Now, I'm sure as many of you realize, we are no longer in those ages. In fact, we're in the 21st century. And times have changed. Perceptions have changed. Children, students have different backgrounds, different experiences, different ideas that should not be stopped or put in a box. And so we need to look at how we are educating our students right now and how we can flip that format to really inspire the next generation of our kids. Innovation to me means new. Am I supposed to be pointing this? There we go. New and breakthrough. Innovate. We want to do new things. Breakthroughs. We're now constantly seeing new products come on the market, new students taking on new ideas. We want to bring in new technology, as well as bring in new, I'm not sure if the battery's running out. All right, cool. Thank you. We want to bring in new technology that is bringing this idea of breakthrough. We want to be constantly pushing the envelope so that our up-and-coming generations are figuring out what more can they do to help our new generation of students, our parents, and our older generations. And of course, that means invent. So I want to look at the grand scope of things before we get down into the nitty-gritty. In the top, you can see Company X. You can imagine a company such as SpaceX, Google, Facebook, these tech giants that are constantly changing the idea of what's new. Now, in this Company X, you have your vice presidents. Before these members were VPs of a big company, they were employees. And before they were employees, they were job hunting. Before that, they likely went to college. And even before that, we went to high school, elementary school, middle school, kindergarten, and of course we were born. I bring up all of these in a sequential order because so often we jump straight to college. We think about when we're successful, we go to college and we get a job. And no one remembers what we did when we were younger. All of that seems to be forgotten. But it's at our youth that we're inspired. It's at our youth that we actually determine those paths that we're going to take in the future. And so I just want everyone to take a trip down memory lane, back to the really great old school days. So think back to preschool, kindergarten, first grade if you have really bad memory like me. Now, when I was in first grade, I was that kid that was very, very good in vocabulary. In fact, I loved it. Every Wednesday morning at 9 a.m., we took our weekly vocab test, and I aced it every single time. Until one day, I spelled the word because wrong. And I remember it so vividly because I got a big X next to it. And after that, I was so scared of getting another X next to a word that I would fear taking a test. And so first grade Lavanya, who was always top of her class in vocabulary, all of a sudden was so scared to take a test that I did worse and worse and worse. Which got me thinking, if education is about learning, then why are we given a big X whenever we're wrong? That instills fear. It gives off the idea that what we're doing is wrong. That didn't seem right to me. I have a couple of phrases that I'm going to put up on the screen, and when I read it out, I would like you to raise your hand if you've ever heard that phrase told to you, or if you've ever said that phrase to someone. The first one is don't reinvent the wheel. So who's heard that phrase before? Look around. Next phrase. Practice makes perfect. Look around. All right. And the last one. Why am I learning this? Who's asked themselves that? Because I've asked myself that every time I've taken a class from kindergarten all the way to my current college days. These are three phrases that almost 100% of this room raised their hands for. That means something. And so I want to take a closer look at what these phrases mean and when we're learning them. The first phrase was don't reinvent the wheel. As soon as I started going to school, I remember my first grade teacher told me, don't reinvent the wheel because you're wasting your time. Don't reinvent the wheel because you're not going to be learning correctly. Someone else, some smart genius person, has already figured out how to do math, has already figured out how to learn about electricity, how internet works, how it functions. And so we're told, don't do this. Don't worry about how it was created. And so we're putting ourselves in a box. We're telling ourselves, let's just follow the status quo. Let's think about memorizing. Let's practice, practice, practice until we just memorize. What I call rote memorization. I was watching a TED Talk back in 2006 by Sir Ken Robinson, who is an expert in the field of creativity and education. And he said a comment that really got me thinking. He said, students are manufactured. I was like, yeah, I definitely feel manufactured, because when I think about it, I feel like I've been put through a conveyor belt, stamped on a bunch of times until I get what I'm supposed to be doing, and then spit out like a perfectly wrapped box as a present. That's being manufactured. That's saying every student is the same. Every person that goes through the conveyor belt needs to come out the same, meaning we go through this conveyor belt and we're supposed to be successful. Successful. What does that mean? It's different for every person. And when we say don't reinvent the wheel, we're forcing ourselves into that factory style of learning. Thinking back, as soon as we got to kindergarten, we went through a bell schedule. 9 o'clock you go here, 10 o'clock you go here, 11 o'clock you go here. Everyone learns a specific type of subject with a specific type of age group, all in the same way from the same book. But what if we change that? What if we took out the don't and just said, reinvent the wheel? That means creating a different style of learning. Now, my sister and I, since working at STEM Center, have worked with hundreds and thousands of students trying to figure out their learning style. And I wanted to give one example of what reinventing the wheel to me looks like. We went to high school students and taught them robotics. But we realized that as soon as we got to high school, students already knew what they did and did not like. By high school, they know that math is too hard or math is too scary. I'm never going to go into a STEM field. So we said, okay, let's go back to middle school. They're younger. Maybe they're still open to the idea. And so we went to middle school students. Same problem. Students had already been exposed to different types of teachers, to the education system, as well as to stereotypes that exist in our world. And so by middle school, they already had these pre-notions of what was good, what was bad, what was hard, and what was easy. So we went to elementary school and kindergarten. That's when kids are young. That's when kids are sponges. They are so interested in learning. When a teacher asks the questions, every kid raises their hand right away because they're really eager to answer the question. But 10 years down the line, when you ask a question in high school, you get one, maybe two people that raise their hand. Either because they're scared that they don't know the answer, they're not interested, they're bored, they're just not participating in the conversation. So going back to kindergarten, going back to first graders, second graders, that's where they're excited, and that's where you can start teaching them early on to get excited, to reinvent that wheel. A stands for apple, B stands for ball. We've all learned it. We've all done those ABC books all together with our moms and our dads and our older siblings. And so my sister and I said, let's create a book because learning starts with the ABCs. Literally, learning begins when we start reading, and that starts with our alphabet. So yes, A stands for apple, and B stands for ball. C stands for cat. But why don't we change that? C stands for cat, but C can also stand for caliper. And B stands for ball, but B can also stand for beam. A beam. Part of the basic building block of our structures. Now, when we first told our parents that we wanted to introduce a book to their kids, their 3- and 4-year-olds, that focused on technical words, parents were scared. They said, that's different. That's too difficult. How will people know what a caliper is? How will people know what a beam is? But I could say the same thing about how will you know what a ball is and what a cat is? Why is it that we're waiting until college-level classes to introduce students to words that are a part of our daily lives? There are beams all over this room, all over the ceiling. So how come we're waiting to tell our kids what beams are? Unless they go into engineering? I think beams affect our lives every single day. And so reinventing the wheel means let's change the paradigm, let's change the normal. Just because we've been doing it for so many years doesn't mean we can't start something new. Now, practice makes perfect. Who here has taken a standardized test? So a lot of people, when prepping for the standardized test, will take a practice exam, grade it, get a bunch of X's and check marks, whatever it is, get their score, and take it again. Repeat that process every single weekend until you ace that SAT. That's what we're taught. Now, for me personally, I don't remember a single thing that I learned from SAT. I did well, I guess. I'm at Berkeley because I did memorization, practice, practice, practice. But I don't remember a single thing, and nothing, honestly, is relevant to me from the SAT, nor is anything relevant from any standardized test that I've ever taken going through high school. And so why are we constantly saying practice makes perfect? What is the definition of perfect? So instead of saying practice makes perfect, let's talk about how mistakes make learning. We shouldn't be giving X's and thinking that's bad. We should be making mistakes so that we're constantly learning, constantly figuring out, and constantly challenging ourselves. For example, I had 2 groups of students that I was working with. I split them into 2 groups. One went to sit at a table, and one was sitting in an open space. Now, the students in the open space, I gave a box of straws and connectors to. The other group of students sat at the table, just sitting there, nothing to play with. And then I asked a question. I asked what shape is used to make a safe and sound structure. And these kids that I'm working with are anywhere between the ages of 6 to 8 years old. Kids at the table. They sit there quietly, thinking. And then they start shooting off answers, every shape that they've ever learned in class. Circle, square, rectangle, triangle, anything they can think of. Just randomly throwing out words. Because they're just sitting there. What else can they do? Now the other group of students, they're sitting in this open space. They have a box of straws and connectors. I ask the same question, but now I say, using these materials, tell me what is the shape that is used to make a safe and sound structure. So the kids start building. They take the straws, they put the connectors on, it falls apart. Falls apart within seconds. And then they start again. They start building, putting the connectors, gets a little taller this time, and then it falls apart. One more time. I say, do it one more time and see what you can do. Try to make a tower that is taller than yourself. So they start building again for that third time. They put the straws together, they put the connectors together, and pretty soon, they have a tower that is taller than them, reaching almost 5 feet tall. And then I pose the question, what shape is used in that structure? The answer is a triangle. And so they learned that the shape that they were using was great for their structure. It made their structure tall. They were successful. They felt accomplished. But the greatest thing is now they knew the answer to my question. But it wasn't just about the answer. They could also explain why. They could tell me, this is why a triangle is really strong. If I tried to do a square, it started collapsing. If I tried to do a rectangle, it just wasn't very sound. But when we tried to do the triangle on the third time, we have a 5 foot tall one, and they wanted to keep building. They wanted a chair to stand on. Now the other group of students, I had to tell the answer to. So I told them it's a triangle. I tried to explain why. They listened. Then I came back 20 minutes later when they were doing something else, and I asked them, hey, what's the shape that we were talking about? What's really important in buildings? They totally forgot. So maybe it's because they weren't listening to me. Maybe they listened and they really tried to remember, but it just wasn't retained. So when we're teaching our students to memorize and memorize, maybe they will memorize, maybe they won't. But the biggest thing is they don't understand why. Which of course brings me to that last phrase we had, which was, why am I learning this? I've sat in science class, math class, language arts class, history class, every type of subject, it doesn't matter which one it is, and thought, why am I learning this? Why is this relevant to my life? Because it really seems useless. And every student thinks this, because we're told to sit in a classroom for 8 hours of a time, listen to lectures that go in one ear and go out the other. Now, we may tell our parents we're learning a lot in school, which maybe we are, but we don't know why we are learning something. So how can we change that phrase of why am I learning this to something different? Like, how does this apply? So if I'm learning something, I need to kind of figure out, all right, okay, I'm going to learn this, but tell me why. Tell me, how does this relate to my actual life? How is it important with what I'm doing? And so when this question came up, I was working with 8th graders, 9th graders, 10th graders. That's the age where they're almost figuring out, oh shoot, I have to go to college in 4 years. What am I going to major in? I don't know. It could be anything. You could go into liberal arts. You can go into history, sciences, STEM majors, engineering. But kind of what makes you tick? And how do you know something makes you tick unless you understand how it applies to real life? So we took a STEM approach for this, but of course it can be extrapolated to all other subjects. And we said, what is engineering? What is computer science? What does that mean to become an engineer? How do we actually show students that math is relevant, that geometry is relevant? And so we said, let's create a robot that students can build, program, and wire together. We had students from the Girls in Engineering program that came to Berkeley over summer, And these 6th and 7th graders didn't just learn about Ohm's law, they created an LED circuit. So first they learned about the circuit, and then they learned the theory behind it. All in all, we need to reimagine how our education system is. We need to rethink how we are teaching our students. And we need to recreate this curriculum that we are so used to. Let's create an active learning experience, active space where students are constantly using their hands and their minds. That's a hands-on approach. And of course, we want to guide them throughout this experience. So we're not throwing a kindergarten in and just saying, here, build this. We're having an instructor there, helping them throughout the way. And then they are learning themselves. Let's innovate education. Thank you.